First, you got to hold truth to power, and you've got to be repetitive. You're going to have to say the same thing over and over and over again, because you're going to have to talk to 25 people to change one person's mind. And then the second thing is you also have to stand for something, not just against something.
Yes.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to The Dan Parsons Show. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. Hey, if you like political campaigns, and hey, who doesn't, right? We have a great guest today, Brent Comstock, the founder and CEO of an agency right here in Nebraska that worked on last year's presidential race. But before I introduce Brent, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page. I'd really appreciate it. Okay, here's my chat with Brent Comstock. Enjoy. Well, and it is my pleasure to welcome Brent Comstock to the Dan Parsons Show. Mr. Comstock, welcome aboard.
Well, it's great to be with you, Dan. Happy election season, as is every month when you work in the political space.
It is. There's no time off anymore. Let me do a little introduction, and then we'll circle back and talk about, even though this is your first time officially on the Dan Parsons Show podcast, you were on the first alliteration of this podcast back when we used to drink on the show.
Yeah, what the hell happened to that?
We got to talk to some people anyway. But Brent Comstock is the founder and CEO of BCom. He's also a Forbes 30 Under 30 nominee. Founded in Auburn, Nebraska, now based in Lincoln, America, BCom is known around the country for their work with political campaigns, celebrities, and purpose-driven brands. In fact, in just the past 10 years, BCom has raised over $100 million online for nonprofits and campaigns. So, Brent, that's quite the resume. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been fun. It's been hard. We've still got more work to do.
Yeah. Okay. As a way of getting to know you, letting our listeners and viewers get to know my guests, the producers have come up with what we're calling Dan's 4 and You're 1. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions, and you get to fire one back at me. It can be one of those or whatever the heck.
Or surprise.
Yeah, that's right. And I didn't prep. Question number 1. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Auburn, Nebraska, which is about an hour south of Lincoln. 2 stoplights, a lot of opportunities.
I like that. That's good. What was your dream job when you were a kid?
So when I was growing up, my parents own a plumbing and HVAC business. So people go, oh, you were taking over the family business. My dream job was anything but being a plumber or an HVAC technician. It's hard work. It's honest work. But I am way too hyper aggressive in travel and moving and going around to be confined to the space that is your domain as a plumber or an HVAC tech.
Okay, we decided what you didn't want to do, but what did you want to do as a kid? I take it relates to what you're doing today.
In some respects, yes. So, I think I have always been interested in the intersection of how business impacts and how business and policy and the political world intersect. And now I'm doing that kind of full scale. The work that we're doing now, but definitely knew that I wanted to go into something that was business oriented, and stumbled my way into the political space and haven't gotten out of it yet.
Yeah. Okay. This next question, I've gotten some really interesting answers. Everyone from Don Bacon to, city council candidates. So you answer it any way you like, but the most famous person you've ever met.
Well, I would say probably the most famous people that I've ever met are presidents and sitting vice presidents. I think that's an easy one, though, because if you work in this space, it'd be like, well, I haven't. I will say that more interesting to maybe pop culture, I have met without knowing I have met the band members of Aerosmith by sitting at a bar in Sioux City, a hotel bar in Sioux City, Iowa. I have also met the CEO of Delta Airlines because I have flown enough that I have ended up sitting next to him on one of his own planes. And it's only funny because if you fly on Delta, you see his face every time you take off because they give you a video. And I couldn't have told you what the guy looks like, but as soon as I heard his voice, I was like, oh my God, it's Ed Bastian. I know exactly who this is. So those are more interesting probably to people. I met musicians and things like that, but we work with celebrities. And so I think it's more interesting the happenstance run into people than the ones that I am now paid to work with.
That's right.
Or I get paid to meet with them.
Yeah. Those don't really count. Okay. That's fascinating. Okay. Last of these questions. What was the first concert you attended?
I attended with my parents and my cousins. I attended a Rascal Flatts concert at what was then the Quest Center. I think it was the Quest Center, whatever the first iteration of
Omaha.
Center. Yeah. And my country roots run deep. I can't say that I am an avid country music listener today, but that was the first concert, at least in memory, unless we count like my sister's third grade choir performance. But I don't know that she would want me to relitigate that, nor do I want to.
Well, Rascal Flatts, yeah, that's a dang big deal.
It was a dang big deal, and then they kind of disappeared, and they've popped back up. I think a couple of times recently, but they've kind of retired. But yeah. I wouldn't know the first thing about any of their recent songs if you asked me. So I hope there's no follow-up question.
Oh, no, there's no follow-up. No, these are fast. Okay, your one question back to me.
Yes. What is one thing that you've never told people during an interview that you think people should know about you?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask what's the one thing I always tell my clients not to say when they go on live TV. I'll just tell that story since it's always fun. Because it's always tense, live television. And, I always tell my clients, it's the easiest and the most difficult interview you'll do. It's the easiest because there's no filter. There's no, right. You get to say whatever you want to your audience. It's the most difficult because it's live TV, right? And so I always, put my hand on them before they go out and say, okay, just remember, don't say fuck. So, and it gets a chuckle out of them. So anyway, now I've filibustered and I forgot what the hell your question was.
Well, it's funny. It's a question that we ask people internally. It's like, well, what's something that people don't know about you?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, yes. You've actually heard this story. Some of my close friends, when I speak to college groups or whoever, I always, who in the room, raise your hand if you've ever thrown up on a United States senator. Raise your hand. Mm-hmm. So I haven't found anybody yet to raise their hand other than myself. So yes, I've thrown up on a United States senator.
Were they a client?
I was working for them. Yes. and believe it or not, I actually got a raise after that. So not immediately afterwards, after the change of clothes, but anyway, the details of that, stay tuned. That's a teaser for, whatever book I'm going to write someday. So,
there we go.
That's good. Okay. I think my first question, let's get into this, Brent. I mean, you have traveled the country this past year. You've heard and saw firsthand the mood of voters. And so was there, maybe just your observations, but was there an overriding single issue that kind of let me start that again. Was there a single issue that galvanized voters to vote the way they did this past election cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if I had the bulletproof answer, my candidate, my side may have fared better. But I think people they like the idea of change, but that is no longer attached to as closely to policy. I think before it was, well, I want change because I want the economy to be different, which was a huge issue. I want change because I want reproductive rights to be increased or decreased. And I think what you saw in this past election, and I can give a million anecdotes of seeing people who would meet high-profile surrogates or candidates or people running for president and vice president, where they would say, well, now that I've met you and I heard you, like I feel compelled to vote for you, but couldn't name policy issues. And it's this juxtaposition, I think, where we're in between, where you have a guy in the White House now who literally made his career on, reality TV, however truthful or not. And so people want change, but they're not looking at politicians in the same way that they did even 15, 20 years ago. It has very much so become vanity, I think, in a lot of ways, which is unfortunate. And I think that the correlation between policy and the actual politician, I don't think has ever really been greater. Yeah. Because if you looked at the platform, and I know I'm biased, it's clear that which side of the fence that I'm on, but people say, well, it was the economy. Well, holy hell, look at the economy of the last couple of weeks. Like if Joe Biden would have done the things that are being done in the last 2 or 3 weeks, first of all, they would have immediately, sought to invoke the 25th Amendment and say that, he was demented. Okay. And second of all, a lot of people said, well, it was the economy. It was the economy. I was in rooms with the vice president, with the people running for, with Governor Walz, with these different people. The economy was talked about at every freaking point along the way. There was an opportunity economy plan. There was an economy plan for small business owners. There's an economy plan for women. There's all of these different pieces. And that's where I sit and go, okay, my assessment of this is that it didn't matter what plan could be put in front of the voters. There was such a desire to just change things without thinking about the policy implications. And I think that fared better for one side than it did the other.
Well, it is amazing. It was, as you said, people wanted change, and that typically means an outsider. Well, we voted in a guy who had already been there. Right. I guess originally he was the outsider, but yeah, we reelected a guy who was already there. So that's not change. Yep. And then you're right. It is a misnomer. And I'm glad to have someone like you who were up close and witnessed this campaign on a very personal, close level. To start knocking down some of those myths. And that is one of the myths that the campaign that you helped with, that you were involved in, never talked about the economy, and that's why they lost. Well, right. That's not true.
Right. I mean, I think there was maybe substance overload even in terms of let's roll out a plan for the American people. And I get it. Like, well, as we've already said, I grew up in a small town in rural Nebraska. I that probably voted, 92% for someone who they believe is the person that is the best advocate for them. And I can assure you, and this is how I know that there's a disconnect between how the political system has worked, is working, and maybe should work, in that you could sit down and say, well, this is the plan for rural Americans from candidate A and candidate B. And if candidate B was, we're going to tariff, everyone, and we're going to rip U.S. aid out, which is a huge export partner for the ag community. We're going to do all these things. And then candidate A, so candidate B is obviously Trump, and candidate A is, we're going to invest in rural health care. We're going to make sure that every community has child care so that you can go and get a job and you can have a job without having to worry about where does your kid go, and you can live in a rural community. Oh, and by the way, farming and agriculture is important. So is manufacturing in rural communities that produce products and goods that ship from the Midwest to the coast and internationally. If you were to put those two types of plans in front of people, a logical, sane thinking person would pick plan A and not plan B. But then they would go to plan A and you'd say, well, this is tied to the Democrats. And they go, well, never mind, I like plan B.
Yeah, because we need to own the libs. Well, and so that gets to the $1 million question or the $1 billion question as far as messaging. What was the disconnect in messaging then between the two campaigns? And we could write several books, and
they are being written. Don't
I'm
worry.
sure they are. So what an unfair question to ask you, but just maybe dip into that a little bit on the surface of what was the disconnect in messaging?
I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize that in every swing state that the Dems lost. We did not lose one swing district, which is in our backyard in Omaha, and in our split electoral vote. So I always tell people now, it's like, well, I live in a state that sent more electoral votes to Kamala Harris than, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and all these other places. They go, okay, whatever. True. But I think first and foremost, before diving into like what was the messaging challenge, is in all of the states in all the swing states, which we lost, the investment that went into those states was significant, as we know. And there was a lot of talk about the billions of dollars that were raised by the Harris operation. And, this is not insider baseball. This has been publicly recognized information that the margin was improved for Democrats in those swing states. It was just that we were at such a deficit before. And so it was, to go from here to here, but winning is here. Not great. And you saw that because in states that weren't swing states, where maybe less investment was made, Trump made inroads there. And that's the talking point that they'll use, is that, they made inroads with young people. They made inroads in all these different places. Yeah, they did. They made inroads in California that went how many points for, Kamala Harris. So congrats on getting 2 more points, but we're ahead by 30 or whatever the number was. So that I think is really important, because I think people say, oh, the Republicans have a mandate and this and that. I mean, look at the percentage of the popular vote. Look at how close each of those. Yes, we lost. Like, I'm not denying that. But to say that it was a mandate, I think is a stretch, unless you're working on anything that's winning is a mandate, which they are. As it relates to messaging, I think I have a lot of thoughts on this, because we have clients that win in Republican plus 12 districts. So someone's voting, they're voting 12 points more for Trump, and then they're also voting for a Democrat for Congress. And so it is possible. And so I look at examples like that, like blue dog type of candidates, to say, what are they messaging on? And I think the important thing is that those candidates are messaging on first and foremost on the issues that matter to their constituents and their district in particular. And, so if you are in an ag industry or an ag district, focusing first on commodity prices and on production and precision agriculture, then think about the rest of the Democratic Party or the rest of your donor base or the rest of this group, because without your voters, you don't have a campaign to raise money for, unless you're a perennial candidate. And I think the challenge in messaging for the left was that we, in effectively 107 days, we were trying to go everywhere, say everything to everyone, and realize that you couldn't deploy that same strategy because you only had 107 days. Yeah. And so my suggestion to candidates that say they're running in swing districts or flippable districts is, okay, first, start thinking about it early, because you're trying to persuade people to correct or to undo what they maybe have done before by voting for the other party. And then it's to kind of start with the inside of the onion and then peel out from there and ask, what are the things that matter the most to these constituents? Because then you can go and say in those town halls that the Republicans are avoiding right now, I get it, Washington's a mess. Here's how I'm delivering for you.
Yeah.
And people couldn't point to that with the Biden administration. And I think a big part of that is because Trump is a marketing, mogul. And so he was there before Biden to be able to set the table for, here is how I'm going to market what I'm doing for you, whether it's even accurate or not, right? Like, remember, drink bleach, it's COVID. But having that and then going to a traditionalist institutional person who's like, hey, the president you shouldn't be looking at your phone 12 times a day seeing, oh my God, he tweeted. And like, the presidency should be boring. It's government. And I just think that pendulum combined with the messaging issues of going 107 days to do a bunch of like, it was kind of doomed from the beginning because we were starting here and trying to get to here.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you for that, for analyzing that. I know a lot of people want to still have an understanding. Like I said, I know you were up close and personal with that. So, okay, well, let's look forward. Let's look for this looking in the back.
I drank my way through the last couple
months. So the resistance has begun to form. We've seen it, recently in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election.
Yep.
Elon Musk, and we can talk about Elon too if you like a little bit, but his approval ratings are in the dump, even worse than Trump as his special advisor. I mean, he suffered a personal defeat in that recent the state Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. I mean, he poured literally millions of dollars into that, and it wasn't close. The Republican-backed candidate got his ass kicked.
Yep.
And so the resistance is forming. We'll see it again in we saw it in Florida with those House races. Even though the Republicans won, they cut the margin in half from what it was.
Yes.
And so I think any of the congressional candidates who are thinking of running, and I know that's your field, that's your world. I mean, if you were in a Republican district that was less than plus 15 for Trump, you're thinking, damn, I got a chance in 26. So maybe just walk us through a little bit of your thinking of how the resistance is forming and what opportunities there are for the Democrats in 26.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of it is an exciting time for people who want to seek public office. I would say we have elected dozens, over 100, worked on hundreds of campaigns. And I am envious of their desire to want to make the world a better place. I do not envy them once they get into the fray. But I think a lot about a horse and a jockey, right? And this idea that you can have, ironclad, just think of if we had the economic positioning that we had in the last cycle. I don't want to keep going backwards, but we go forwards by looking backwards.
Yeah.
If you had different candidates, and that's not to say that they were the wrong candidates at that time. It's like, okay, let's look ahead. You have a good, solid economy. You've got an opportunity to brag about protecting healthcare amongst a variety of different coalitions, women, ACA types of people, Medicaid, insulin costs are down, all these different pieces. That's the horse, right? And you've got it, and it's great, and it's well fed, and it's ready to run. But then if the jockey is not either able to keep up with the horse or hasn't done their own reckoning, then you have a challenge, right? And I think where I see Democrats and frankly people that are just sane, reasonable people, I think the question that I ask candidates to ask themselves is, number one, can I deliver do my policy positions and what I want to build a campaign around, does that deliver better for the district than what they have now? And two, am I the best person to deliver that message for the district? And I think a lot of times you will find candidates that run with a great message that they just can't break through the noise. Or you have a great candidate that just their platform either is totally misaligned with the district or that, they're chasing fringe issues. I think a great example of someone who in the first, couple of months in Congress has been doing a really terrific job is Sarah McBride from Delaware, the first openly trans person in Congress who has been crucified by like 4 people on the Republican side to the point where it's obsessive. It's kind of gross.
Yeah. I saw the one clip of the chair of her committee misidentifying her on the record.
Yes. And and Congresswoman McBride could go in and just feast on that. And frankly, she would raise a lot of money if she just fed into it. She would, she's the first openly trans member of Congress. But when that all started, she said, I know that this is an obsession of some colleagues of mine on the other side. I'm here to work for the Delawareans that elected me, and they did not elect me because or not because of who I am by gender identity, but because they want a fighter for them. And so let's, put our heads down and get back to work. And I think that's a great example of someone who could have, she could be the jockey for a lot of different causes, right? And in that moment, she could have been the jockey for raising a bunch of money online, going viral, and doing all these different things. But instead, she said, no, the horse is the Delaware voters, right? Yes. I am running this race for the issues that they care about.
Yes.
And I think that's where you see Blue Dog Dems win a lot. I think it's where you have a perfect horse and jockey scenario.
So that's a great point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it just reminds me. So there's some within the Democratic Party who want to hang on to some of that identity politics, right? And so anyway, how is that working itself out within the Democrat leadership as we approach the 26 congressional elections?
Yeah. Well, first we are like 70 or 80 days. I don't even think we're at like day 75 or 80 of Trump V2, and which is, it feels like 180 months.
Yes.
But the Dems elected new leadership from chair all the way on down, and anytime you have a loss at the presidential level, there's a big shift. And of course, in one like this, where there was a lot of contentious moments with Biden stepping down, Kamala announcing all these different pieces, there's a lot of personalities, right? I think that the takeaway, though, the new DNC chairman's Ken Martin, a fellow Midwesterner, proudly worked on his campaign for chair. One of the things that I think is really important is we get to the issues that the majority of people care about, and we enact policies and we fight political fights that win for those demographics and for those particular issues. And then on the things like, what is our stance on, transgender, affirming care?
Women in sports and whatever. Yeah.
Build a point, stand your ground, and then go back to the things that the majority of people care about.
Yes. Thank you.
And that was the argument. You know this just as well as I do. A couple of years ago, there was this massive, assault on the transgender community by a state senator here that led to other state senators filibustering. And the thing that we worked on those efforts as well. And the thing that I repeatedly said in media prep calls to reporters that were like, okay, and how do we tee this up? What's the messaging? The messaging is, why are we villainizing, the 7 trans children, that's not an exact quote, but the 7 trans children in Nebraska who have sought gender affirming care without their parents' consent under the age of 18, right? Like, one, the majority of the people that were against those people had never even met a trans person. And 2, it wasn't the issue of the day. And so I think that's where both Dems lose, because Republicans want us to talk about that.
Yep.
Right. And that's why I say, go to the issues, talk about the economy, talk about job creation, talk about less government. Like, Republicans used to be the Doge is the thing about Doge and polling is everyone, Dems, Republicans, we all agree that government should stay the hell out of certain spaces. Ironically, they want to stay out of, our way, except for in, doctors, exam rooms. And
yes, exactly. Yes.
But lean into those things. And I think horse and jockey mentality is also like, you might have a complex strategy for solving the healthcare crisis in America, or the fact that we're the only, fully developed country that that runs pharmaceutical ads. Right. but you have to be able to say it to the people that are voting for you in a way that's palatable to them. And I think a lot of times you get these people highly educated, and that's not to say the community is not educated. It's just that their method of reading and consuming information has to match with you, which is that whole horse and jockey theory.
Yeah. Man, we're eating up this time really quick, Brent. That's all right. It's not radio anymore. We can go as long.
I'll give shorter answers.
No. Well, that's what the producer's for. Cut out all the fat. But anyway, no, this is good stuff. Good stuff. If you were advising a candidate who is maybe thinking of here in Nebraska or any Midwest state or anywhere, as far as this, as the Wall Street Journal called it, the dumbest trade war in American history, that is impacting our pocketbooks. I mean, we've seen the Dow just plummet. The world markets are in disarray. I mean, and Trump is hell bent on shoving this down the world's throats, this trade war. And so, but yet I've been having conversations online with folks and trying to bring people together to say, okay, where is that line that if you did support Trump in this last election, where is the line when you can at least start questioning some of his policies? And I have yet for anybody to raise their hand and say, yep, I made a mistake and I wish I wouldn't have done it because my 401k is for shit now. What would you advise?
It's just a 401 now. Hold the K.
There's no zeros after it. Yeah. I mean, what would you advise those candidates, even at this early point, before anybody is even a candidate? What can the resistance do to continue to shine the light on this issue when it comes to this trade war?
Yeah, I think first you got to hold truth to power and you've got to be repetitive. And I think that's the hard part, is that we're not anyone who is moderate right to left. We are not in a position at this point in time where we can say and do something and then it spreads virally in the same way that the media on earned media, social media, traditional news media on the right does. Because we don't have a Fox News. Yes, we have MSNBC, but it's not Fox News. And so I think it's recognizing that if you are going to run, and you should run in these districts and a run everywhere type of strategy, is you're going to have to say the same thing over and over and over again, because you're going to have to talk to 25 people to change one person's mind.
Yep.
And so that's the first thing, is that you need to hold that kind of truth to power mindset of like, this is how this person is working against you. And I'm not here to talk him out, whether you like him or love him or don't like what he did on this and this and this. Look at the numbers that exist. And then the second thing is you also have to stand for something, not just against something.
Yes.
And I think that's where a lot of these campaigns, they run against someone, which you're obviously always doing, but you have to not only convince people to fire the person that's in that office currently, if you're running against an incumbent, you have to tell them why you're the best person for the job. And I think that that's where a lot of times we get so negative. And then you go near the end of the journey and the campaign. Why is that person running?
Yep. Yep.
And so I think it's hard. It's going to be really hard. I mean, we are working in most of the districts that Trump won where a Democrat is elected, and we're pitching as we speak right now most of the races that Trump won that a Republican won, but by a point or two, where we see big inroads for Dems in the 26th cycle. And it's hard, and you got to be a strong communicator, because members of Congress now are also their own press secretary. What you say and do on Twitter and social media. And you're not holding news conferences like you used to anymore. And so you've got to be able to get out there and say, here's why this is bad. Here's what I've got that makes it better. This is why I'm the best person.
Yeah. It's those 15-second sound bites that nobody's writing for you.
Right. And sometimes you don't even mean to be a soundbite. And you're like, oh, shit, got that.
One thing I wanted to bring up, there's a bit of a race in Omaha for mayor, and I covered all those candidates on the podcast here, and so our listeners and viewers are following that. So Gene Stothert and John Ewing, instead of what I think most people thought of Gene Stothert and Mike McDonnell. And so that'll be an interesting race coming up here in a few weeks.
It will be. And I think, what I think a lot of people were surprised in the kind of rank order, but you think here are two people who have been elected city or county-wide for decade plus, both of them. And then, I think obviously former Senator McDonnell was definitely probably one of the top two noisiest candidates, and obviously the other Republican in the race. But I think you think about that voting constituency, and then you think about voting history in his last term in the legislature, and it does not take a lot to realize that a district that voted for a fairly, established Republican woman mayor, free maybe 4 times, who does work with people across the aisle.
Correct.
Voted for Kamala Harris, that voted for Joe Biden, that votes for a majority Dem city council. It's not as surprising. I think we just have been so consumed with, well, this is what the establishment says are going to be the top. And good for both of them for leveraging their campaigns to get there. And it'll be interesting to see. It's way more interesting. I think in Lincoln, we have at-large city council seats, but we don't have a mayor's race, which obviously adds energy and gusto to it.
Yeah. And those 9 were whittled down to 6 in the primary this week. So anyway, before we get out of here, I want to give you the chance because I know our viewers and listeners love your anecdotal stories. So is there an anecdote from the campaign trail, from the presidential race, or, dog catcher in Virginia that you want to leave us with?
It's funny. I could fill 40 minutes of random stories, but this will be our third presidential, third or fourth presidential. Obviously, one was during COVID, which we didn't have any audience interaction. And I worked on a variety of different aspects of the campaign and different pieces of mini campaigns. We have dozens of clients. I think the most interesting thing, and what I would want to leave people with, is the idea that one, this is hard work, but it's honest and good work. And I think in the last those last several months of working, either adjacent to, directly in, or with principals from the very top, literally the top, all the way down to the bottom, is that, the Harris campaign definitely brought joy to a lot of people. And I think that it was so shocking. I remember I had a couple of friends who worked, as staffers on the campaign, and they were so deflated afterwards. And they were like, I'm emotionally sick. And a lot of them are like, we worked on Hillary's race, we worked on all these others, but this feels different. And I think a lot of that is because the people that we're running are genuinely good people. And I think that makes it harder, but it also restores some sort of hope, I think, because I tell people Trump is doing what he said he was going to do.
Yep.
And he is unapologetic about who he is, about, the asshole demeanor that he has built. And I think that oftentimes we try and, how do we get there with that? And I was in rooms with people that everyone would know and names that everyone would know. And I can say that there was no difference in what the desired outcome was from what people heard and saw and read, and what was really the mission of the campaign. Sure, there was a lot of mudslinging. There was a lot of behind the scenes in any campaign of that size, backstabbing. But I think in congressional campaigns, we worked on, in presidential campaigns, in PACs, and all these different groups, that sort of joy and hope, I think, is what people need to see more of. And I think that hopefully this cycle, we kind of balance the scale a little bit, where it's like we want impact and we want politicians to not be so status quo, but we also want them to deliver for us. And I was in a meeting, just to finish, I was in a meeting with the National Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago, and someone had mentioned that it's not progressive or conservative, it's not far left or moderate, it's, are you new generation, or are you status quo? And I think that this cycle hopefully will bring a new generation of people that fight for the same issues, that fight for a balanced economy, all these different pieces, but realize that maybe the status quo isn't what people want, because we've seen that. And I think that that new generation, wherever you fall on the spectrum, if you're the horse and jockey and it fits in the right place, just be the new generation version, and I think you'll go far.
Brent Comstock, that's exactly why I asked you to come on this podcast. That was beautiful. It really is. I mean, we could go on, and I want to have you back because it is so much. And I've watched so many people through the years. I've done this for, several decades now. And it's so encouraging to me to see a new generation that has, I'll just say it, the heart to care about people and want to do good in this country. And so good on you for recognizing that's what gets you up in the morning. That's what gets you motivated to help elect someone in this country. So thanks for your work.
Well, thanks for having me, and good luck to everyone running for office this cycle. We'll be here.
All right. See, I told you that would be fun. Thanks, Brent, for joining me today. And don't forget to check out our other episodes on YouTube right over there. That's the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.